helps me that on the good news of God's love and God we trust. And to be honest, I don't know exactly how that got on there. I don't know what policy or congressional action was done, but isn't it amazing that we trust this more than God that we proclaim? And so the simple discussion for today is to give up. Now, you don't get to hear that too often, do you? Give up. But I want to encourage you to give up on the things that you cannot control, to give up meaning to God's purposes, and to give up together in this exciting network of disciples known as our church. One of the tough things about being alive is knowing that we will die someday. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon writes in such a way, "All is vanity. I must leave to those who come after me. All their days are full of pain, their work is a vexation, and even at night their minds do not rest." And that happened thousands of years ago, and that still describes us, the difficulties of life. And knowing that's a special challenge and privilege for us as humans, to know we are not simply like the beasts who do not know their end days. We do know. And so from that, I say to you, give up the idea that you control all, because we are here for this precious amount of time that God gives us, and then we bequeath it to the next generations. We are simply stewards. But that's not just sad, that's the truth, and it frees us up in which to live our life as stewards of God's grace. I had the privilege of going with Adam Ackerson, one of our younger members, to a stewardship conference up at Lutheran Seminary this past week. It was entitled Stewardship for Working with People Under the Age of 40. Now, one of the things that I realized going up there is Adam is 26 and I'm not. We snuck away to play a little golf, and that was obvious that he was 26 and I was not. But there was a couple things that just hit me. The congregation that we have here, we, during our worship, take time to pass these offering plates, right? And for you who are new to church or haven't seen it before, we pass these offering plates that people have an opportunity in which to give. We also have mechanisms that you can do automatic withdrawals. We call it simply giving. But the statistic that was so interesting to me was that for a vast majority of the people under the age of 40 do not use cash or checks. And so here we have this mechanism in which does not work for many young people in which to be generous and to share. Now, I guarantee you we're not going to just have, as you come into the pew, you slide your debit card. But we do need to have mechanisms that somebody can click on a QR code that they can do that during that worship time, because they're not carrying their stuff. And I'm getting old enough, I said, well, just bring your cash or bring a check. But I think it's similar to the old days when someone said, oh, forget about your money, just bring your oxen like the good old days, and we'll assemble it all at the church. We need to keep up. One of the amazing things about money is how universal a concern it is for all of us at all different ages. There was an amazing exercise to me, about 125 people gathered, young and old, more 40-year-olds assembled than a typical church service. And so in that, the pastor said, are you willing to take a risk? Sometimes when you're away at a conference, you'll take more of a risk. Everybody stand up. You can sit down when you have less debt than this number. And they started at $5,000, and this is unsecured debt, so like a student loan or credit card debt. Started at $5,000, and then $10,000, $15,000. How high do you think we went up before everybody sat down? $172,000. Okay. Yeah, that was kind of the reaction. But what I liked about it was there wasn't that sense of shame. I mean, there's some shame around such a debt number, but if someone had $10,000 a year in undergraduate debt and then goes to seminary and gets 15, and 15, and there's 45 plus 4, that's 85, and get married, there's $170,000, right? And so the message is this is a major issue. So for that couple, they'll be paying for the next 30 years, $800 and some dollars in debt. And so I can preach all I can and all I want to about being generous when there's reality of debt and how it impacts life. And so the gospel message is not just for the incredible gift of forgiveness of sin, of life eternal with Jesus Christ, these incredible, powerful truths of our life, I mean, let me just say it here in the psalm that talked about that we cannot pay a ransom ourselves. And so let me just remind you that God, through the ransom of Jesus Christ, that theological understanding of God's great gift through the cross, is that God has paid for it all. But the freedom of God's love for us is also meant financially. And so I came back just thinking about our congregation. Dale Miller has been such a dear person. His love for the Lord, head of our stewardship group, his love, will be doing the children's message next week. This is the love that God's freedom is for our finances too. And how can we do that? These young people under age of 40 connect in a virtual community, and they want to be part of something greater than themselves. They want to learn about how, when we gather together, the power of generosity. They are giving. They just are new into their lives and are trying to make sense of being generous. They want to be part of something. They want a network, or other words, just being part of this community. And that's what we have the opportunity here in this church. When you think about it, as individual donors, we can make an impact, and certainly each one of us has agencies and institutions we support. But our church is a grand experiment in generosity. We together, at all different levels of giving, with all different experiments, get together and we learn more about being a steward. We learn more about the issues in which we fund. And my eyes were open. Young people and older want to know where their money is going and want to know about the issues that are being resolved. So the $7,000 that we did and sent to Table Grace, we need to learn more about the hunger issues and the poverty issues in our community. Not just sending it to an institution, but sharing the stories that are happening. And so this is what our congregation can be: a growth in discipleship, a growth in your education. I'm not entirely sure how we help with debt and budgets, but I know that we can. There are programs and services, and Dale has one no, I forget. What is it again? Good Sense. Thank you so much. I was thinking of another one by Dave Ramsey. Good Sense. And done without shame and indictment for any of us, wherever we're at. It's like the good news of God, which is, okay, that's where we're at. And now we are free to experience God's love and to regroup and support each other in our payment down of debt and of unwise expenses. I'm so thankful that we are gathered as people of faith in that Christ is all for you and for me. And so in this last lesson here, I get one just little humorous thing for me. So someone's asking Jesus to settle a family dispute, and Jesus deflects it by this phrase: "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" Now what I love about that, who is the judge of our salvation? Who is the divine judge in which we can have full confidence in his love? This is Jesus the Christ. And so there's this gentle deflection here, but then this incredible story. In this conversation of a person with their own soul, and here's what I'm going to do in talking to my own soul, is something that's free for you and for me not to worry about. We communicate with God, we communicate with each other. We don't just delude ourselves into talking about relaxing, eating, drinking, and being merry, although we want to celebrate God's graciousness. But this idea that life is incredibly important, and we have an opportunity, knowing more than others, that we can give up on the knowledge that we control everything. We can give up to God's purposes of reconciliation for this world, and to learn more through our church's budget and through our own individual stewardship to be engaged in God's world. And we do this giving up by not giving up the good news of God's love for you and for me. We will not give up that. That pervades all financial knowledge. It's not just about being smart, it's being set free. That we are loved by God and called forward in loving community. And so I ask for this church to be a place of tremendous generosity, that for new members and for old, for young and for old, that we don't give up on being stewards. That we are invited to share, we are invited to save, and we are invited to spend in ways that are authentic. This is special for this service. One of the, because I thought about using it, but I'll just share it here. It struck me. One of the pastors said, I take my credit card and I put a sign of the cross on it. Now, in dollars, you don't want to deface currency. That's not the law. But on the credit card, puts a big cross on her credit card. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? That every time you see it, is this honoring God? I would say for you and for me, every time we sign our name, we sign as baptized children of God. So whatever we sign on is this freedom that we are not in debt to our money, that we are not in bondage to our money, but we are set free as baptized children of God. We are set free, and that Christ is all for all. So I ask for God's blessing in your life, whatever the reality is. If it's higher or lower, know that you are not alone. Whatever the reality is, know that we can work together, and this generosity of God's love is amazing. Because at the end of the day, we give it to the next generation. At the end of the day, we give it to others. At the end of the day, it's all from God. And what an awakening for us. Give up, to give up, to give up. I thank God.